Hi everybody, my name is Rohan, CTO and co-founder of Fundera. What I want to talk about today is about measuring engineering productivity. It's engineering productivity, product performance, engineering performance, whatever you want to call it, but it's basically understanding as a team how you're performing. So just to give you a quick background on Fundera, we are a marketplace that helps small businesses find loans. So your local coffee shop, your laundromat, if the coffee shop needs, a new espresso machine or something like that, and they have trouble going to their bank, we help them find a loan. So we have about 50 lenders on the platform. Some of the things we're working on, now that we've been in business for about 3 years, we're thinking about how can we reverse engineering some of the criteria of our lenders to better predict success. We're starting to get into some of the more data science challenges that I've been wanting to tackle, and now we finally have the data to do so. Shameless plug, we're hiring, so if anybody's looking around, let me know. So the crux of this talk came because myself and my team, rightfully so, were asking a lot of questions. I'm sure many of you have asked these questions either directly to your manager. If you are a manager, you've had these talks with your team, but these are kind of the big ones. So like, generally, what do I have to do to get paid more? I think everybody wants to get compensated fairly. They want to know that, if a new person joins the team and they're a senior engineer and you're a junior engineer, like, why is that so? Is it just because the boss felt that was the right thing, or is there some actual structures or some actual reason why it's that way? Am I getting paid fairly right now? If I'm an employee and I'm really pushing myself to become better at my craft, should I, be compensated for it? I'm sure many of you, because you're at this talk, are probably, actively looking at Hacker News or Reddit or whatever it is. A lot of us really care about getting better at what we do. But one of the things that we don't really talk about is, how do we make sure that we're fairly getting compensated for it? And lastly, am I doing everything my team needs and expects of me? So I've heard so many horror stories about people getting let go, or just bizarre stories where there's just no transparency. And frankly, I don't think that's really acceptable. If you're a good manager and somebody has to be let go, it really shouldn't be a surprise. They should really know what's expected of them, and they should be fully aware that they weren't performing. So yeah, like I said, these are very difficult questions. You don't really hear a lot of people talk about this. And as an engineer, you want to get better at your craft, but you want to be compensated for it. The problem, though, with engineering performance is that it's really hard to measure. So if you're looking at this list saying, yeah, none of this really makes sense. Number of bugs, obviously, how hard are the bugs? What time are you spending fixing bugs versus writing features? Lines of code, makes no sense. I don't even have to explain that one. Code reviews, are you spending the majority of your time helping your peers? That's great, but maybe you're shirking your duties as an individual contributor. Features completed is the closest one, where you could argue that that's the best measure because it's what the business is expecting of you. But that's not all there is to being an engineer. There's DevOps work, there's helping your team get better. There's a lot more to being a great engineer than just shipping features. And then one of the other issues is if any of you work at a company where there's more than just an engineering team, which is probably the majority of you, how do they feel about your performance? So we have a really stellar sales team at our company, and they constantly have higher and higher expectations every month, and they say, how come the engineering team doesn't have to ship more features, or what is the thing they have to get better at? And so that lack of transparency creates a lot of issues. Any of you that have worked at a company where you have to ship stuff for marketing or ship stuff for sales, I'm sure there's always a little bit of tension, but if the expectations are set correctly, you can reduce a lot of that. So knowing that these are all the challenges, the goal that I had in mind was to create a fair and transparent method to measure all of this and to make sure that everything is equal. The first approach, and so this is a company called Git Prime. They actually reached out to me. Really, really cool service. I encourage everybody to check it out. They do a lot of analysis on the code itself. So they do a lot of static analysis. They'll figure out, where is there like really high risk code. They measure churn. They look at if you can set certain standards like the requirements for comments, etc. They will allow you to really, dig into some of the code. I think stuff like this is really awesome, but it's just a complement to actually, career growth and like working with your team to get better. But certainly really cool. 15.5 is another example. I just took a screenshot of their site. Employees take 15 minutes to answer questions and managers spend 5 minutes with them. Also, pretty handy, but doesn't really capture what I was looking for, which is this kind of like list. You could imagine like a one-pager or something that just has these transparent things that are important to the team and how we measure each other. So one of the things that we tried at Fundera, and this is chaotic, was we used Asana, and one of the things that I wanted to look at to just get insights into how my team is performing is a couple of key metrics. So one of the things we looked at is how often are tasks stuck in a blocked category. So that would mean that like there's some problem with the requirements, or there's some issue, something to dig into. How long did something stay in QA? How many times did things kick back and forth? That to me would signal maybe the developer isn't doing everything they can to actually make sure something works. Interesting stuff, but again, like it was way too much work than it was worth. And with a team under like 20, you probably don't really need to do this length of work. So what we ended up with is this engineering rubric. It's a really short list of expectations per engineering level. So if you're a junior engineer, here are your expectations. If you're a senior engineer, here are your expectations. So we have 5 levels at Fundera. Junior engineer is level 1. If you come in as a software engineer, you're a level 3. And then level 5 is a principal or a senior engineer. The rubric itself represents all the core values of the organization. Do you care about performance? Do you care about security? For us, we've been in business for about 3 years now. We're starting to get into a lot of performance issues. We handle a lot of personal financial data, so bank statements, driver's licenses. You could easily just, if that were breached, a lot of problems would happen. I would definitely lose my job. So we take security very seriously. I think the key with the rubric is to be not too tactical, but not too vague. So don't be like, oh, you have to ship 3 things a week, obviously. But you also don't want to be like, get better, because you can't really do anything about that. And so the one thing that's helped me is that it's allowed for a lot of structured conversations. So especially those of you that either manage a team, you've been wanting to become like a lead engineer or something like that, it's a really tough transition, especially if you're naturally not very confrontational or extroverted or something like that. So the rubric helps to structure the conversation so that you can actually deliver feedback in a concise and understandable way. So just a couple examples. As a junior engineer, one of the things we care about obviously is code quality, and we basically say, we want the engineer to leave the code in a better state than before. They have ownership of quality throughout the QA process and a high level of quality at delivery, and they just have a desire to grow as an engineer. As a senior engineer, it's a little bit, you don't have to read everything here, but the point is that the senior engineer has to do everything the junior engineer does, but then takes it one step further. So they have to demonstrate a use of testing. They have a strong understanding of performance and security. A drive for improvement. If you're a junior engineer, you should want to get better. But as a senior engineer, you should really not only want to get better, propose the right things that we should be doing, and then also like lay out the plan to actually adopt those tools. So for example, if you introduce a new workflow tool, it's not enough to just check it in. You actually need to think about how am I going to get the team to actually adopt these tools. Selfishly, it takes work off my plate, but it's one of the things that I think is important. So very quickly running through how you can make this happen, and this kind of applies to whether you're a manager or not. These are the sorts of things that you should be looking at. And so I think if you are on a team and you want to know where you stand and you want to know if you're getting paid right, these are some of the steps that you can follow. If you are a manager, these are some things that you can actually implement. So the first thing you need to do is you create an initial set of levels. So if you want 2 levels, engineer, senior engineer, if you can figure that out, and then compensation bands. So it gets really weird when And this happens really often at startups I've consulted at, and then even at Fundera at the beginning. You have people coming in with the same title that get paid these, drastically different amounts of yearly salary, and it just, if you look at it as an outsider, it doesn't make any sense. It's kind of unfair. So what we did was we created compensation bands. So like if you're a principal engineer, you should be making between this much and that much, every year. And so if somebody elevates to a new level, they can, it's very clear to know how to promote them and how much they should be getting paid. So the first thing you need to do is establish core values on your team. So is performance a big thing? Is participating in every single code review important to you guys? Is participating open source really important? It's difficult, but it's really important, and actually it helps a lot with hiring. So if you're bringing somebody new on the team, do they care about a lot of this stuff? So for example, when I like to hire people, I like to look for the ability to learn. I don't really care if you know our tech stack. I just care that you care about getting better, and I care that you will be able to pick up the technology. And that's, I always thought that was kind of how everybody did things, but I've been very wrong about that. So I've tried to make that part of our rubric, but it's not necessarily part of everybody else's. Create the initial draft, very rough draft because it's certainly going to change. You revise them, so you create that list of values, then you chop it up based on the levels. So, what should a junior engineer have to do, and then what should a senior engineer have to do? You review as a group in your next team meeting. The goal there is that you want to have everybody agree on what you're being judged on. So it'd be kind of weird to all of a sudden show up and be like, okay, I'm gonna, this is how I'm gonna decide how much you're gonna get paid. I've found that there's much more buy-in if everybody can kind of collectively agree, like this is what's important to us and this is what isn't. Then you meet one-on-one with your team to do this. You do kind of a dry run so that you don't actually record anything, you just kind of see how it goes. You can give the feedback, but you're definitely going to be changing stuff, so you can save yourself the time. And then you just want to track stuff. So you want to score each team member before your one-on-one, and then have them do the same. The reason for that is if I go into a meeting and I'm saying, oh my God, this guy is like not doing very well with how they work, how they ship unit tests or something like that, or they just are not shipping any features with unit testing. I might go in saying that their code quality is at a level 2. They might go in with a level of 4. It becomes a conversation piece. Whereas if I just went into that conversation, I said, look, this is what you need to do better. It won't tell me where they stand before I deliver that news. And if there's a huge gap, then I know that there's probably a problem on my end where I'm not setting the expectations right. And then just discuss next steps. If it's like, hey, before you build features, let's go through an implementation plan. You have it recorded and you can go over it together. And then promote those that consistently outperform. So if they're at their current level and if you're rating them a 4, 4, 5, 6 months in a row, there's no reason why they shouldn't be promoted or given a raise or compensated in some way. This is kind of an example, hypothetical. This is not the very best organized way to do this. So these are some of the values that we have as a team. In this case, for example, I say, I gave a level of 2 for this person, where I think that the design feedback is often shared too late with mockups. This person thinks they're a 3. That becomes a conversation piece where there's kind of a misalignment on what the expectations are, and it's very easy to just say, this is what you need to improve. And then you can basically just distribute this list every week or every month or however you want to do it. We do it every month, and it just gives you an actionable list of stuff to do. I've worked at a lot of places where basically you just come into work, you ship your stuff, and you can kind of feel this tension with either your manager or other people on the team. You know where you stand, kind of, and it's just very awkward because nobody kind of talks about, what can I do to get better? And a lot of managers like to just kind of skirt the issue because it can be uncomfortable. Nobody really likes to talk about it. I've had I can count on one hand or two hands how many very seamless conversations about it I've had. And it's important that, for me, to have a lot of structure to be able to do this stuff so that it's a lot, simpler. This is an example that Coursera uses. Very hard to read the text, but they have 7 different levels across associate designer, product designer, senior product designer, etc. And then they have 3 major categories: knowledge, craft, and influence. So kind of similar, but obviously slightly different for their organization. So basically, going back to the initial 4 questions, you can answer a lot of these questions with the rubric. So what do I have to do to get paid more? Well, if you look at the rubric and you're a software engineer and you see that principal engineer is in there, you just start doing the principal engineer stuff. You work with your team, you work with your manager, you build your skills to get there. Why is this person a senior engineer and I'm a junior engineer? Well, if they're coming in and they're actually doing those things that you have in that rubric, then yeah, they should deserve to be a senior engineer. And if you're not, then you should be at your level. But if you don't have something to point at, it's super awkward. Am I getting paid fairly right now? Well, if you are at the level correctly, and if you're operating in that compensation band, then you're getting paid correctly. And then am I doing everything my team expects and needs from me? If you look at that rubric, you're a junior engineer and you're only doing half of those things? No. If you're doing all of those things, yes. Very simple, very easy to know, and the best part is that everybody is measured on the same scale. I think when we started Fundera, or a lot of like smaller startups, it's really easy to get away with not having to do any of this, but it really bites you when you start to hire and you start to scale up really quickly. We had 2 people for a really long time, I think over 7-8 months, and then all of a sudden I think we added 5 people in a matter of 3 months. Suddenly all this stuff became a thing, and across the company it became a thing, across my team it became a thing, and I realized I needed to do something about it sooner rather than later, because if I wanted to hire people and I wanted my team to respect these incoming people and everybody to not have that tension, we needed some sort of thing to look at. So just some parting thoughts. This isn't just for engineers, it works for product and design. We rolled it out for the design team, for both teams. If you're a manager, think about answering these questions for your team. It might just come up, and if you don't have something ready to go, it can be really tricky to navigate. If you're an individual contributor, ask your manager these questions. Think about, you can just openly ask, how am I being measured? How are you deciding how much I should get paid? When am I going to get a promotion? What do I need to get a promotion? It can be really awkward, but it might kind of spawn, some discussion. I think at a larger company, you may not have a lot of these issues, but in those kind of middle, anywhere between 20 to 100 people, before there's formal HR, before there's a lot of this stuff, it's kind of up to the managers to do the right thing. So it's worth having these talks. And then before doing any of this, your company and your team needs to talk about leveling and compensation bands to make sure that you have that groundwork in place. I went to a talk as part of the first round CTO summit, and there was Sam Schlace, I think is his name. He was a VP of engineering at Box, and they implemented something really similar to this. I stole a lot of their ideas. So that first article is really solid, explaining how they went about doing things. I mean, he's implemented this across multiple companies and had really great results. The second article is a little bit more about the actual measurement side of things and metrics. Super interesting, definitely worth a read. And then the third was recommended by somebody on our design team, how designers do leveling. This is the Coursera example. A lot of similarities. Every single team has specifics, whether it's engineering or product or design, that you need to address. So these all need to be tweaked slightly. So that's it. Thanks for listening, and happy to take any questions.
Certain example where this went badly?
I think in the beginning when I first tried to roll it out, we would look at the initial list and then just say, 4 or 5 of these things, either A, don't really matter, or B, it's just impossible to know whether you're getting better at any of this stuff. So that was kind of the only downside. I think I started this process kind of open about the notion that I didn't want to just give promotions and raises on some hunch or like how I felt about somebody, and I think just having the buy-in from the team allowed us to iterate on it, and so that kind of avoided a lot of pitfalls. But this is my first time implementing something like this, so I don't have a lot of experience, but so far so good.
Now what do you do if you have like one core value for the team, and I don't know if this is a real example, but maybe someone's just not wired to be great at that thing, whether it's like interacting with other departments, or how do you handle a situation like that? Do they still have a path?
It's a tough call. I think ideally you would use the list to hire, and so like if those values are truly the things that everybody should represent, then unfortunately like that person, if you were recruiting them, it would, depending on how severe it was, they may not be a fit. Thankfully, I think with my team, we're able to kind of follow without a lot of attention. I think luckily we landed on a set of values that everybody can work towards. It's an interesting case though, because I'm sure there's obviously personalities are really different, and that would be a problem. So I don't have a good answer, but I think for ideally, I guess we would handle it on the recruiting side of things. Yep.
What was the motivation to implement this?
We had a couple folks coming up on their 1 year of working at Fundera, and I realized that we didn't really know. So we had a sales team that had their own system of bonuses and rewarding, and a lot of it was based on how many loans are you funding, and they had a lot of hard metrics to decide what people would get paid, and I realized our team didn't really have anything like that. And I couldn't answer the question in a very sane way, which was like, how do I decide what somebody should get paid? So when, obviously when folks are coming in to work at Fundera or anywhere else, you're looking at what market, compensation numbers are, and of course there's that one-on-one negotiation. You need to figure out, where they are currently and how to make the offer good. But at the same time, I didn't really map that back to any sort of central thing. So, luckily our team wasn't so big that this caused a lot of issues, but, had I hired somebody that came in as like a VP of engineering, but they, had, like 2 years of experience, and so, basically if the qualifications didn't match the title, then I'm sure it would have caused a lot of strife. So I just kind of thought I didn't want to really deal with that, so I just started along this path, actually, and also that talk. So that kind of inspired me to start thinking about this stuff. Yeah. Yep.
Did you have any employees who, once you implemented this, you found that they actually should be getting paid less than what they were currently being paid? Deal with that problem?
No, because I think again, this was mostly luck, so most of the folks that worked, I have a lot of my team here actually, so coming to this talk was part of our rubric, so they have to be here. A lot of the folks on the team had been here for quite a while, and skills had improved, and we had a handful of folks that were not being paid enough. We thankfully did not have any folks that were paying too much. We did have a couple of employees in the past that were not fits. They were, that was prior to having the rubric. So had I implemented the rubric earlier, we would have had that situation, but luckily we did not. I think what you would do though in that situation is to basically define what they would need to do to equalize, to get back to where they need to be to get paid the right amount.
Do you think those people, since the development of the rubric is a collaborative process, do you think they might try to skew it in their favor?
I guess so. What do you guys think? I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that happening. When I went through this with each person on the team, it was kind of like, one thing would be not very applicable, or we were forgetting something that this person was doing really well that actually really mattered to the team. So after doing this for like 2 or 3 weeks, we kind of settled on something that everybody kind of agreed on. But it took a lot of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back sort of thing. Yep.
I have 2 questions.
Oh, okay.
The first
Sorry.
one is you have mentioned desire to improve. How do you measure desire?
That's the tough. So I was looking at that, and I was like, I know somebody's going to ask this. So I think that one is, so at the junior engineer level, the metric is a desire. So when you're coming in, are you going out of your way to pick up the technologies that are presented by the team? Are you, so for example, if somebody we introduced a new packaging system as part of, to replace NPM, we're using Yarn. Anybody that's working in a JavaScript framework, you might have had to do this too. So a junior engineer, the expectation would be, are you adopting these new technologies with the process that we have in place? Not having a desire to learn and a desire to kind of pick up new technology would mean that that person basically just either wasn't really present or wasn't really part of that process. There is no real metric, but I think the conversation would be something like, it's really great that you want to use this sort of technology. What can we do with the team to, implement this across and make sure everybody can use this? If you're the person that kind of just wasn't really present, then the conversation would be, well, we decided as a group like we were going to move forward with this. X engineer implemented this with a document and with a call out in Slack or something that said like, this is how we should do things. How come, what happened basically? So yeah, that one is tricky. And we do have a couple of those still in our rubric that I can't put a number on. I'd love to. I'm still thinking about how to do that. But yeah, that one specifically is tough.
And the second question is about responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is known that people, they think that they're so awesome and can do whatever work there is. So how to measure quality of this work?
The quality of like what kind of work do you mean?
For instance, not every company requires everybody to be senior software engineers. There should be some juniors as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how to prevent a person to do just earning the points for the rubric and to do the job that is actually needed?
That's a good point. I think ideally, so in our case, for example, we are still at the phase where we are not a massive consumer place, so we don't have tons and tons of technical challenges, for example. So a lot of the folks that have joined the team are very vocal about how the product should work. They participate a lot in the product process. That's different than obviously if you were to work at a larger company or where you have a specific technical need or something like that. So that's an example of something where without doing that, it would be tough to find a fit for you in the team at all. So the idea was to craft the set of values such that if you're not doing any one of these few things, like a couple of these things, then by definition you're not doing your job. I can't think of, I'm trying to think through our list and I can't think of how somebody could not do those things but then still not be performing well. But that's a good point, because I think if you could arrive at a list that's very easy for somebody to just check the boxes and then not actually contribute to the team or the business or something like that. So so yeah, I guess that's something that we should probably keep in mind.
Yeah, that's the difference between technical and strategical decisions.
Right.
At this point, it would be very difficult.
Yeah, very difficult. Yep.
So have you given any thought into how this criteria map to the success of the company?
That's a good point. So it's tough because we're using kind of like a pseudo OKR. We tried the OKR system, which is, I don't know if people are familiar with that. It's like objectives and key results. And so you basically have this top level thing, like we want to improve conversion by 3% or something like that. Then we kind of, all of the features that are going into the roadmap should go back to that overall goal. And so I haven't done that in the rubric. I kind of treat the rubric as as an engineer, regardless of what the company is doing right now, are you doing what I'm expecting of you? If we decided to shut down our marketplace and then go into, whatever. I would like the rubric to still work. We'd probably have to change a little bit, but I don't want to tie it to business objectives that much. I think one of the values that we have is impact. So it's like, are you, as a software engineer, are you implementing the things that you're assigned to in the sprint? Are you working with others collaboratively, et cetera? As a senior or principal engineer, are you kind of going out of your way to participate in discussions around product and roadmap and what the company needs to be doing? So kind of by proxy, you're kind of affecting the way the business is going as you grow in the company.
Can I then rephrase?
Yeah.
How do you know that these are good criteria?
I guess just by us, discussing as a so two ways. I think the discussions that we have internally as a tech team, and like what do we think are the important things that we should be judging ourselves on and people that come into the door. And then also, does this, I guess that's really the main thing. I'm not really sure how we would know these are the right things or that we are missing certain things. Like one of the conversations I had with everybody on the team when we were first rolling this out is like, are you doing anything that you think is not being recognized by this rubric? So like, are you, if hypothetically, if somebody was like, look, I'm code reviewing every single code review, even though I'm not assigned to them, like, shouldn't that be something that we care about? And so it's like that's a discussion that I think, like with the team, you can talk through like what would be the right way to handle that. But it's a good question. I think it's basically just constantly evaluating whether the rubric is right. We did the same thing at the company level. We started with a set of values, and there were 9, and it was like impossible to even remember all of them. So we whittled it down to 5, and I'm sure it's going to keep changing, but basically just making sure it's an iterative process, I guess.
Cool. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks.
That was awesome.